Welcome to the Red Hot Reds podcast presented by Ohio Sports Talk. This podcast is for Reds fans, by Reds fans. I'm Roger Strauss, this is Ricky Logan, and today we have a special guest who is known by the Cincinnati Reds community, known for his broadcasting for the Cubs and Arizona Diamondbacks and football and the NFL, and now he was working on CW Network. But before we get into that, we want to thank Jordan and Doug for lending us this platform, Ohio Sports Talk, and we're here to bring you Reds content throughout the 2025 season. So please subscribe, like, share. It'll help us in the algorithm. Remember that likes mean wins for the Red Legs, so we need that, especially after a little bit of shaky midweek couple games there. And also subscribe on X, Facebook. We're also a podcast forum for Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for Ricky for doing all the stuff, technical stuff behind the scenes, all the social media stuff. So get that all going for Red Hot Reds and Ohio Sports Talk. But right now, Ricky, we got the interview with Mr. Thom Brennamon. Let's start the show.
Let's go.
This is the Red Hot Reds podcast. Here are your hosts, Ricky Logan and Roger Straz.
Welcome to the Red Hot Reds podcast. I'm Roger Straz. That's Ricky Logan over there. Today we have a special guest, a legendary broadcaster that needs no introduction, but we'll still do an introduction because I'm very grateful for his time being here with us on the podcast. His career actually spans longer than Ricky has been alive, if you can believe it. And he has covered such legendary teams like Chicago Cubs in the 90s. He covered the 2001 World Series winning Arizona Diamondbacks. He covered your, as he would say, Cincinnati Reds in the 2000s. And he's here to talk about his career, some of the things he's gone through, some of the things that he's experienced in broadcasting and in life, and also talk about a little bit of Reds at the end to get his perspective on how he sees the 2025 team. The man, like I said, needs no introduction, Mr. Thom Brennamon.
Roger, Ricky, how you guys doing? Thanks for having me tonight. This is cool. I love the intro music. That's awesome. Who is that, by the way? Is that you? Is one of you guys do that?
Yeah, I didn't make it. I found the audio online with royalty free stuff, and then funny enough, AI for the voice. So
no kidding.
Yeah,
that music was good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ricky's got all the technical stuff. So if you got anything like all the social media clips, everything that's all Ricky. So big props to him. I really appreciate his work on that. Thom, to kick it off, what I guess would be your first baseball memory or first Reds memory or best baseball memory? Any of those kind of combinations?
Well, first really baseball memory. I mean, when my dad got the job in 1974, we were living in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and he was broadcasting AAA baseball and ABA basketball and was doing college football. I mean, he was working, nonstop trying to make a living because you weren't making a lot of money doing really any of those jobs collectively. And he got the job in Cincinnati, and we had never been to Cincinnati and had never been north of Richmond, Virginia in our lives. I think I was 11 and my sister was a year younger than me. And I remember we went to visit Cincinnati, and it was a cold, dreary kind of February day. It was before spring training got started, and it was raining so hard that we couldn't go out into the stadium. So if you remember where the grounds crew used to come out behind home plate, they had that door and it covered up there, underneath the stadium is where they had all their equipment, but you could walk up right to the glass and not get rained on, and to look out at that stadium. And I mean, I had never seen anything like it in my life. I had been to one Major League Baseball game, I think, in my life before then in Atlanta. And that stadium was just a big round stadium with two decks. And here we walked into Cincinnati, and you got the blue and the green and the yellow and the red. And it just seemed like it went forever. And I can still see that picture like it happened 5 minutes ago. And that's where I think I realized for the first time, I mean, when you're 11, you understand some stuff, most stuff you don't. Hell, you could say that for being 61. But just you realize then, man, this is the major leagues, and it was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I guess is there any minor league teams out there in North Carolina at all that you've seen? Like when your dad was covering, did you see those ballparks while
Yeah,
he
he
was?
was in Virginia. We were in Norfolk, Virginia. They're called the Tidewater Tides now, but they used to be called, or no, they're called the Norfolk Tides now. They used to be called the Tidewater Tides. And so, back when he was broadcasting, and for his team with the Mets, we were the Mets AAA affiliate, and you had Jerry Kuzman and John Matlack and Tommy Agee and all these players that were coming up. The Pittsburgh Pirates team was in Charleston, West Virginia. They had Dave Parker and Rennie Stennett and Richie Zisk and Manny Sanguian, all these guys that went on to be great players. Rochester was Baltimore's AAA team. They had Don Baylor and Bobby Grich. And I mean, it was amazing when you look back on some of those. I mean, they're Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer of guys or could be Hall of Famers that came through just in those 3 or 4 years that my dad was announcing the games. And I used to go to a lot of the games. It was great. It was really, really cool. AAA was very different than it is now. AAA is almost like the big leagues in a lot of ways now, as far as the stadiums and all that kind of thing. But it was it was really, really cool way to grow up.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah, it's funny because there's 2 major league teams playing in AAA stadiums right now. So
Yeah.
it is funny
That's
how
right.
that works out.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you more like when your dad Marty first started calling games, and you were you there a lot? Did you come around a lot with him? And
With the Reds?
yeah, and
Yeah,
did you have like any favorite players or anything?
Well, I mean, when I was younger, before we came to Cincinnati, I was a ball boy for the Virginia Squires in the ABA. And on our team, we had Julius Erving, we had George Gervin, we had Charlie Scott. The Kentucky Colonels had Dan Issel and Artis Gilmore. I mean, I remember, again, like it happened an hour ago. I have told this story so many tens of thousands of times, but I'll just never forget it. I was a ball boy for the visiting team. And I was 10 or whatever I was. And back in those days, the locker rooms, especially in the ABA, I mean, it was like it was a big time arena where the Squires played, the Virginia Squires in downtown Norfolk. But I mean, the concession stands and the whole 9 yards. It was but the locker rooms. And I remember walking in, and Artis Gilmore, he's 7'2", 275 pounds. He's a basketball Hall of Famer, one of the great centers of all time. And he's sitting on the stool, and he says, "Hey, kid, come here a minute." I come walking over. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" He says, "Hey, can you run out to the concession stand and get me 2 hot dogs and a Coke?" He hands me a $5 bill. So I walk out. I get the 2 hot dogs, get the Coke. I'm walking back in. It costs like $2.20. So I hand him back the $2.80. Is my math right? Anderson math? Yeah. Kid, you keep the change. And in those days, man, $2.80 was a lot of money for a 10-year-old. So that was, and then, when my dad got the Reds job, I'd go quite a bit. I mean, in the summer, especially when I was younger. As I got older, not as much. But it was weird because I could go in the clubhouse. I would go with him on the days that I went and would sit in the manager's office with Sparky Anderson while he taped the manager's show. Just be the 3 of us sitting in there while he taped it. I could run around the field. And so, I had gotten to know all these guys, Pete and Johnny and Joe Morgan and Dave Concepcion and George Foster and, on and on and on and on. But when the game started, kids were not allowed to go to the press box. So when the game started, I would sit in the stands, and a lot of times I'd have to go down and sit in the stands by myself. So I wound up sitting for like 4 years. The games that I would go, most of the time, I'd end up sitting with Jeff Ruby. He was a bouncer at Lucy in the Sky, which was a downtown hotel. He was a manager of the hotel, and then they had a big nightclub on the top of the place called Lucy in the Sky. And after he'd be the manager of the hotel during the day, he'd go upstairs and be a bouncer at night. And I mean, when I see Jeff now, I mean, you talk about a world apart from then and now for all of us. And so, but those are really cool memories. He was such a great dude, and I still really like him a lot now.
Yeah, that's man. I feel like I have to keep my jaw not hitting the floor.
I mean, and I look at it that way. It's funny you say that because I mean, I still look at it that way. I don't look at it like some 61-year-old guy who, I got to do this with this guy and this. I mean, Jeff Ruby was nobody. he was a guy who, had gone to college on an academic scholarship. He left his house when he was 16 years old. He played football and then tried to make his way in the world after getting out of school, Ivy League school, nonetheless. And he was just such a fascinating character. He was just this big, strong, tough, and most of the nights I'm sitting with him, he's got a black eye or a cut above his eye or, bloody nose. I mean, it was incredible just when I even tell this story, I can't believe.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, all the just stories that you've hit us with so far, it's amazing. Have you ever considered like writing a memoir, writing any?
No, I really never have. That's just not my thing. I think a lot of times, a lot of those stories are good, but a lot of times people just want so much dirt now, and I'm not into it because there are a lot of people who could write a lot of dirt about me, and probably most of it would be true. But I'm just not interested in if that's what somebody wanted in a book, I would certainly want no part of that.
Yeah, that's fair. And we don't want to make this interview wanting to talk about your dirt or we want to talk about
Believe me, you get to be my age, you don't worry about it anymore.
Okay, but there was a seminal moment obviously in 2020 where you had an on-air inappropriate slip of a slur, and forgive my preamble, I guess have come along the path of where you were in 2020 and all the time that you've been at Chatterbox talking about it and all the stuff I've seen in the media and whatnot. I guess I want to commend you on all the work that you've done and all the stuff that you've done along the way. I know you've never, I think, ever, to my knowledge, ever made yourself out to be a victim or try to blame cancel culture or anything of that nature. So I guess I commend you on that level and doing the work. And I really actually commend you as well to bring on, I think, a guy that's become your friend, Sid Ziegler, to
yeah.
And that was quite educational, at least for me as well. That seeing that there's a guy that's working out there, his Out Sports website and all that, and he's worked with you on some things and stuff like that. And I guess I'm just trying to show my admiration and gratitude for the things that you've shown to us, just Ricky and I being young Christian men trying to do our best. Because I mean, in my personal opinion, I don't think anyone should be judged by the worst thing they've ever done, or at least one of the things they've ever done that's poor, whether it's in public or private. And I guess to cap off my preamble, my long winding talk, is that have you found it in your heart to forgive Nick Castellanos?
Oh yeah. It's interesting you asked that, and thank you for the things you said. I mean, I really appreciate it. It was, your faith is what keeps you going. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, that one was just a very public mistake, or became a very public mistake. But there are so many other things that, that I wish I hadn't done that were far more, impactful in my life than that even. Yeah. I mean, that led to the end of my career for quite a while, but it wasn't like it ended my world. And, my kids were healthy, thank God. My wife and I have been married almost 25 years. And so, it wasn't the easiest 4 years, that's for sure. And, but I got to do a lot of stuff that I would have missed out on, especially with my wife and kids. I mean, I got to go, my daughter was a senior in high school and our son was a sophomore, and they were both very highly decorated athletes in high school and good students and good kids. And I got to do a lot of stuff that I would have missed. I mean, our son, for example, was a phenomenal lacrosse goalie and won a state championship his sophomore year. He was a starter as a sophomore, and I got to go to every game his 3 years playing. I got to go to all my daughter's stuff, got to move her into college, got to move him into college. So, I got to spend a lot of time around them, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. People say, oh, come on, that's BS, and I'm like, no, I really wouldn't. And now that ship has sort of sailed. And, I thought that once I was given an incredible opportunity with the CW last year to do the Atlantic Coast Conference football and basketball, I thought maybe that someone this year would have me doing something in baseball. And when that didn't happen, I think a year or two ago, I would have been really upset about it. Now it's like that ship really it sailed, and that's okay. There are other things you try to find to do and keep going. The guys at Chatterbox were unbelievable. Trace Fowler over there to give me a chance. And so that was great. And the CW thing's been great. And so, you got to keep going. And that's the only thing that I would say to people is that, you're right about being judged on your worst moment. And you're never as great as your best moment. And, there are a lot of people out there right now that are thinking, man, I have really screwed up, whatever it is. I've screwed up with my wife, or I've screwed up with my friends, or I've screwed up with my kids, or I've screwed up with my job, or whatever it might be. I've just screwed up my life. But if you can find a way just to keep going, there's a good chance it's going to turn out and come out on the other side.
Yeah, and that's where faith comes in too.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Having a strong faith really, get you through that. And I will say selfishly, if that hadn't had happened, this would have never been a chance, So I selfishly, you not calling games every day, just this wouldn't have happened.
Well, you know what? I don't think so. I still think something like this would have happened. I mean, I wasn't when really this whole kind of world, it was still going on, podcasts and all that kind of thing. But it's really been in about the last 4 or 5 years where this whole thing's really exploded on stuff like this that we're doing now. And I used to do interviews all the time, even with college kids and college students. I mean, I'm watching my son, trying to get going in broadcasting. And so, I've tried to never forget that, there was a time where there were a lot of people I really needed if they could come on with me as a guest in whatever I was doing, and I was doing radio or whatever the case may be. And so I've tried to never forget that. So I think we would have still done it, Ricky. I think we'd have still done it.
Well, yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, shout out to Luke. He's got the Cape Cod League, right?
Yeah, coming up this summer.
Yeah.
Really excited for him, and he's worked very, very hard. I mean, he's worked basically like a full-time job outside of being a student. He's a very lucky young man. He's lucky that he can go to a college where he's had the opportunity to get these opportunities, and I just have so much respect for him. And not just because he's my son, but just because he's really busted his ass and he's continued to bust his tail to try to get better and better. And it doesn't matter if they ask him to do, women's water polo or women's softball or wrestling or volleyball or whatever it is, he's like, hey, I'll raise my hand. I'll go do it. And he may know nothing about it, wrestling. I mean, he knew nothing about it. And yet, he spent 3 days watching YouTube trying to figure out the whole thing. And thank God he had a good partner that night.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And going back to, more of a somber, more of an upbeat feeling. What was it like being on the broadcast when the Bartman incident happened?
It was, you really have to go back to, so in game 5, the Cubs lead, what was it? 3, so 6. Yeah. They're up 3-1. And game 5 is down in Miami, and Josh Beckett pitches. I think he threw a complete game shutout, I think. And so now, I had been gone for, I think it was, our daughter had just been born in July. And in those days, when Fox had both league championship series, Joe Buck would do one, I would do the other. But during the division series, I would be on the number 1 team with Tim McCarver because Joe was still doing football. So they would take me off football, put me in there as a number 1 team, and then we'd get back to our groups when the LCS came along. So I had been gone, I think, for like 17 straight days between the division series, bouncing all over the place. We do a game in Boston one night. Next night, we're doing a game in Oakland. Next night, we're doing a game in Atlanta. I mean, it was insane. But boy, was it exciting and was it fun, man. It was really fun. So now comes so at the end of game 5, I'm kind of bummed because I know now I'm going to be gone at least another 4 days. And my wife and daughter are back at home by themselves for almost a month. And so I'm just going, wow, okay, we're going back to Chicago. But then you're like, okay, it's 3 more days and you're doing game 6 of the LCS. So what the hell? Let's go have some fun and go do it, right? So, but we get there and at Wrigley, and I had done hundreds of games at Wrigley because I used to announce their games. And with the anticipation of having not been to a World Series since 1945, there were, 42,000 people in the ballpark. But outside the ballpark, there were, I think they said it's close to like 200,000. I had never seen anything like it in my life. It was just indescribable. The amount of people and the electricity and the whole 9 yards, and the Cubs come out and jump out to a big lead. And now here comes the 8th inning. And they're 6 outs away from getting to the World Series. The crowd is just, it's unbelievable at this point now in the 8th inning. And it's nighttime, and the ball goes up down the left field line, and Moises Alou's a left fielder, and he goes over and he jumps up by the stands. He comes down, and then he throws his glove on the ground and he slams it in the green, like he could have caught the ball. I mean, to this day, there's no way he could have caught the ball. I mean, they've done studies on this stuff. He couldn't catch the ball. I could tell he couldn't catch the ball. But when that happened, it was almost like a mystical moment occurred, just his reaction, because it set off a chain of events, which if you try to sell it to Hollywood, it would never happen. They would never turn it into a show because nobody'd believe it. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden we get a shot of this guy who's sitting there in his ball cap and his glasses, and he's sitting down in the first row. And, we show him, kind of reaching up, not over, but reaching up, and along with about 15 other people around him. And so as that progressed and the next batter came up, gets a base hit. Yeah, there you see him right there on the headphones. He's just reaching, up, and Alou, that looks like he could catch the ball, but that's a great picture. But anyway, so, then they get a hit and they knock in a couple of runs. And now, our director and producer, we keep going back to this shot because we can see people, starting to harass this guy. So now I have a monitor. I've got like 5 monitors in front of me of replays that might be coming. But I've got one on our live handheld camera that's right in front of me. And I can see everything going on with Bartman that's not on the air. And I finally pushed the talkback button to talk to our producer, Jeff Gowan, and our director, a guy named Jim Lynch. And I said, fellas, we got to quit taking shots of this guy. I said, this is not good. And this is getting ugly, really ugly. So, now I can see him. They're throwing beers, they're throwing cans, they're throwing all kinds of crap at this guy. Security comes down, they get his tail out of there, and off we go. So the Marlins proceed to score 8 runs. There was a ground ball to Alex Gonzalez, a shortstop, should have been a double play. He's great fielding shortstop, goes right through his legs. The Marlins get 8 runs, and that was that. And, one of the most incredible moments of my life. So here you've got that going on, right? And so now the game's over. And at Wrigley, up by the press box, you have to walk down these ramps like fans that sit in the upper deck. You've got to walk down these series of ramps to get down to ground level to get outside of the stadium. But about halfway down, there's a door that cuts through the Cubs offices. And I knew the code from having worked there, and I punch in the code, and it's me and Steve Lyons and Al Leiter. And we get down and we're walking out, right under the marquee of Wrigley Field, Clark and Addison there. And they had just built the year before. So employees, when they came into work in the winter, they try to open the door, but the wind would be blowing so hard that a lot of times it slammed shut, whatever. So they built this probably 9-foot concrete L-shaped wall around this door. So I opened the door. And as I opened the door, Michael Jordan is standing there by himself behind this wall. And I mean, you're just like, I had met him a couple times.
Yeah.
And I just said, Michael, what are you doing? He says, dude, have you been out there? I said, no, we're just getting ready to get out of here. And he said, there's like 150,000 zombies walking around out there. He said, it's the scariest thing I've ever seen. He said, I'm staying right here. I said, what do you mean you're staying right here? He said, I'll stay here if I have to all night long. And I said, well, look, I said, we've got a car that's picking us up about 7 blocks down because they had closed all the traffic. It was all foot traffic. They closed all the streets. I said, our producer's coming here. I said, he's about 6'5". Leiter's about 6'5". Steve Lyons is about 6'5". I said, you know, you could just stand in the middle of all of us and let those guys sort of surround you. I said, and you can come down to our car and you can get a ride wherever you want to go. And he's like, nope. He said, I'm not doing it. I said, okay, see you later. So off we go. So I get back to the hotel, and there was a couple friend of mine. They were like second parents to me, a guy named Eddie Shepard and his wife, Pat Shepard. And I'd gotten them tickets. They had come into the game. And so, you know, you're totally wired. You know, it's like 11 o'clock at night. You're just so wound up. Game 7 is going to be the next night. I said to them, we're going to go have a beer. And I said, well, let's walk down the street. I said, there's this party at this place, a Major League Baseball party. I said, let's go down there and have a beer. And so we can get in there and it won't be packed and crazy and stuff. So we walk in there, and sitting in the very back of the place is Josh Beckett. And so I walk up to him. I had met him a couple of times through Lenny Harris, who was still playing for the Marlins. And Lenny Harris, good friend of mine. And I mean, of all the people I've ever met in baseball, I think I love Lenny Harris more than anybody I've ever met in the game. And Beckett's sitting back there, and he's drinking a beer. And I walked up to him. I said, hey, Josh, Thom Brennamon. Yeah, Tom, how you doing? I said, hey, I said, you know what? If you want to tell me to buzz off or you know, whatever you want to say, I said, I'm really surprised you're in here tonight. He said, well, yeah, why is that? I said, because Jack McKeon, your manager, had told us that, yeah, you just pitched in game 5, but that you would be available in game 7 tomorrow night. I said, you know, and I said, I was around 2 of the greatest pitchers that ever pitched, and Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson. I said, neither one of those guys would have been sitting in here. I can tell you that. And he says, well, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. I said, okay. He said, our starter is a number 5 starter in our rotation. He said, he's going to get knocked out of the game in about the 3rd inning. And he says, I'm going to come in the game. He says, and I'm going to pitch the last 5 innings of the game. And I'm going to stick the bat right up there blank, and we're going to win and go beat the Yankees in the World Series. And I thought, all right. And that's exactly what he did. He came out the next night, came in the 3rd, pitched the 3rd, 4th, or the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th inning, gave up 1 run. Closer came in, closed it off. They win the thing and win the World Series, and he's the MVP. It was a wild night, man. I know that was a long story, but that was one of the most amazing nights professionally of my life, with all that going on.
We had no idea that. We were just wondering about the Bartman incident, but that are you completely sure about the memoir part, Tom? Because I feel like that could be at least a chapter right there.
You know, the saddest part of that whole thing was the next morning I get up, and I rarely ever turn on the TV when I'm in a hotel. Don't know why. I just, you know, I just don't. But that next morning, I mean, I was just so ready to go, and the game wasn't until 7 o'clock at night, and I'm up at 6:30 in the morning. I was like, and I turn on TV, and the first thing I see is like this shot from a helicopter looking down. You know, there's some highways and there's some buildings and there's all this kind of stuff. And I'm just thinking, well, it's, you know, somebody's doing the traffic on the morning show or whatever it is. And within 30 seconds, you find out that helicopter is flying over the place where Steve Bartman works. So the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, rival newspapers, even to this day, both had the guy's name. The Tribune decided they were not going to put his name in the paper. The Sun-Times did put his name in the paper. And I have frequently wondered to this day, because he's never come back. I mean, he's been offered literally tens of millions of dollars to do an interview, to tell his story, to write a book, whatever it is. I don't think I've ever seen him. I don't think he's come out publicly, not one time. That was in 2003. That's 22 years ago. And I often think about him and wonder, you know, how he's doing. I felt terrible for that guy. I mean, he was just a hardcore Cub fan, and no one wanted them to make the World Series that night more than he did. and he found himself in the crosshairs of forever, eternity. People know his name.
Yeah, if there's ever any chance he hears this, I hope that you're the one that gets to talk to him. I think it'd be kind of full circle.
Yeah. It's interesting because Bob Costas, who I've known for a long, long time, and he told the story about the guy who was allegedly, they made a movie out of it, about the bombing in Atlanta during the Olympics. And Costas was the only guy, he was covering the Olympics for NBC. And when everybody was saying, "Oh, this is our guy. This is our guy. He's the guy that did it. He's the guy that did it. He's the guy that did it," and they had no evidence that he did it. And Costas, and they played the clip in the movie when they made it. Richard, what was his name? I can't remember. But Costas kept saying on the air, "Hey, look, they haven't even charged this guy with a crime yet." And all of us here on NBC are sitting there giving this guy's name and blah, 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 blah. Well, it turns out he wasn't guilty. And years later, Costas gets a note. He's doing a playoff game in Atlanta. And he gets a note from one of the security people and said, "This guy is standing outside the press box with his mom. And he wants to know if he can just come in and say hello and say thank you." And Costas said it was, to this day, it was without a doubt the most surreal moment of his life. This guy came in and sat next to him for like a half inning during the game, and he got a chance to talk to him and has talked to him from time to time since. Weird stuff can happen, man, and it has nothing to do with sports.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's wow. Yeah, and yeah, I think they even made like a 30 for 30 about the Billy Goat curse and whatnot, and the Bartman and stuff like that. Yeah. And yeah, hopefully Steve's doing well.
I hope he is too.
I think your call, listening back to it, as it did it justice. I don't think you had any, ill will or anything sort of suggestion that he should be in any, sort of crosshairs or whatnot. What ended up happening was obviously ugly, and the Cubs fans hopefully will never ever have an incident like that again. But speaking of other great incidences that you've been a part of, great moments in sports, just to transition, what do you think is your most favorite broadcasting moment? I think Ricky, he's got a graphic here. We got 4 options here, or you can go off the board. I think we've got the Appalachian State Michigan game, which I think I told Ricky in text before the show, like that might be a low key favorite of yours, knowing your Ohio State fandom. Then there's the Statue of Liberty play, Boise State 2007 Fiesta Bowl. That was a amazing call. I watched that back just recently. I think the Derek Jeter flip against the Oakland Athletics game.
Yeah.
And then Ricky, that's the Jay Bruce walk off to get to the playoffs game.
Yeah, and then the Bartman thing, and then Randy Johnson throwing a perfect game for the Diamondbacks. As far as just, the Jeter flip thing gets a lot of pub and gets a lot of play for the call of it, and it's certainly humbling the amount of publicity it gets. There's no doubt about it. But that one in the upper right hand corner, that Fiesta Bowl was just, it was the final 8-10 minutes of that game was just so extraordinary that I had never seen anything like it. It's hard in this day and age because Boise State has become a well-known football program. I mean, they had the kid who was a runner-up to the Heisman this year. They've had some great players. They've had some great teams. But this was the first year they were ever really on the map. And I mean, they're playing an Oklahoma team that has Adrian Peterson, that has Gerald McCoy. It ended up having, I think there were like 9 first-round draft picks on that Oklahoma team. And when we had gone to Boise to visit with their coach, Chris Peterson, and their team, I was doing an interview with their center. Their center weighed 250 pounds. And you're just going, man. But I'm sitting there with our producer as we're leaving their practice, freezing cold night in Boise in December. And I said to our producer, I said, am I crazy, or do those guys actually think they can win the game? And he's like, oh, I think they can win. I said, I got that feeling too. They think they can win. And they come out and they just kick Oklahoma's tail all over the field for the first 3 quarters. And Oklahoma just stayed barely close enough to not get blown out of the gym, but they were getting their tails kicked. And then all of a sudden, Boise State quarterback in the fourth quarter throws this pick, touchdown Oklahoma. Oklahoma comes back the next time, touchdown, take the lead. So now it's a minute left in the game, whatever it was. Boise State's out of timeout. It's they get a couple of first downs, but they're like at the 35 or something, and it's 4th and 21. And I mean, how many times have we all seen that? Bengals games, Ohio State game, whatever, 4th and 21, right? Yeah. I mean, and there's pros all over the field for Oklahoma, and they throw this hook and ladder play, and they score a touchdown. And it was the most unbelievable play I have ever seen in my life. Yeah. And when they score the touchdown, you're just like in shock. But as a broadcaster, you're sitting there going, all right, wait a minute now. They got a decision to make. Are they going to go for 2? Are they going to kick the point after to tie it? And immediately, here comes they get inside on that play, the hook and ladder. They get inside the 5-yard line. First down, they don't score. Second down, they don't score. Third down, they don't score. Fourth down, they have a wide receiver throw the pass. The guy catches it for the touchdown. And I'm looking at Barry Alvarez. Crowd's going crazy. Barry Alvarez and Charles Davis and I are doing the game. And I hit my button to cut off my mic, and I pushed his sitting next to me, Barry Alvarez. I looked at him. I said, what would have happened if you'd have heard that play called when you were the head coach by your offensive coordinator at Wisconsin? He said that SOB would have been fired before the play was ever sent in. And that's the play they run to score the touchdown. Well, now they go for 2. They do the Statue of Liberty thing. The kid, Chris Johnson, takes the ball, runs it in, scores. They win the game. Place is going crazy out in Phoenix. And we throw it down to Chris Myers, who is our sideline guy, with this Chris Johnson, who had a monster game. And while he's interviewing him, a bunch of cheerleaders are hanging around Chris Myers and standing behind him. And all of a sudden, Chris Johnson says to Chris Myers, hey, can you just stay with me here on camera for 1 minute? And Chris Myers is thinking, what is this guy doing? He gets down on his knee and he proposes to one of the cheerleaders, who's his girlfriend, and asks her to get married. And you're going, what? And it was that ride home. Chris Myers and I laughed like nobody's business, just thinking, can you believe that just happened? A, that Boise State wins the game, but B, then the dude proposes to his girlfriend, who's a cheerleader, right on the field on live television. It was that was a fun night, really. But all those moments were great. I mean, all of them were. The Michigan thing was phenomenal. That was the first ever game on the Big Ten Network. That was the day they turned the Big Ten Network on. That was the first event that was on the Big Ten Network. The Randy Johnson thing, he was just such an unbelievable competitor. God, that dude. Him and Kurt Schilling, I mean, I could spend days talking about those two guys and having the chance to call them together for about that 4 or 5 year run, because I've never seen anything like it. They were unbelievable. It wasn't this 5 inning, 6 inning, 7 inning nonsense. It was 8, 9 every start from the first start of the year until Game 7 of the World Series. So all those moments were, thank God, they were all a blessing just to be there.
Yeah. Quick follow-up. Does Chris Johnson still propose if he doesn't score in the Statue of Liberty play, you think?
Well, I mean, if they lose a game, I doubt we're probably not interviewing him. So, he might have, but I don't know. So Chris told me Chris Myers tells me that he talks to him from time to time. They're still married and doing well. Really? And he had a shot in the NFL. He played for like maybe a year or two as a backup, and then whatever he's doing now. But he'll forever be known by those people in Boise because, man, I had a chance to do one of their games 2 years ago or last year.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was the president of the United States when I walked into that place, because everybody who is a fan there has heard me call that game. They've watched it 10,000 times. It's one of the coolest moments in Boise State history for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I guess speaking of like Chris Meyer, talk about some of your previous like partners you worked with, like Brian Billick and Brindley and Grace. even calling a game with your dad, that was a cool moment too. And then,
that was really
what about Elliot at Chatterbox?
Oh yeah. Elliot, he's the man. He's the best of all of them. Just ask him.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have been. It sounds so corny, but it's so true. I have been so blessed that every one of the partners I've ever had, going back to, I started with Johnny Bench, doing the Reds games in the late '80s. I go to the Cubs and I'm with Bob Brenly and Ron Santo and Harry Carey and Steve Stone, which was just the most extraordinary 6 years of my life. I was young, I was single, I'm living in Chicago. I got this great job, but I'm working with these not only great on the air, but just incredible human beings, and the relationships that I had with all of them and still do now with Brenly and Stone, who are still alive, and Harry and Santo have since passed. And then when I go out to the Diamondbacks, I bring Brenly along, and we were together. And then when he became the manager of the team, Steve Lyons came in for a while, and he was a partner of mine at Fox as well. Great partner, fun guy to be around. And a guy named Jim Traber and, Rod Allen. And then there was a bunch of those. And then Grace finally came in my last number of years in Arizona. And he was so much fun to work with. He walked in the door every single day, just in a great mood. What you see is what you get with that guy. He is just a freaking hoot. And I love talking to him now. I talked to Brenly quite a bit. And then on the football side, I was with Anthony Munoz the first year at Fox when they started in '94. And then I was with Ron Pitts for a number of years. And then Billick for a long, long time. Charles Davis a little bit. And then Chris Spielman. I loved every single one of those guys. Charles is an amazing dude. Billick I talked to quite a bit. He's still up in Columbus. Anthony obviously is here in town. I'll see him from time to time. But Spielman, I think he made such an incredible impact in my life as a person. He was great on the air, but he's one of the most extraordinary human beings that I've ever met in my life. He was, this raging lunatic, was on the cover of a Wheaties box in high school. He was the first non-Olympic amateur to ever be put on the cover of a Wheaties box when he was a senior at Massillon in high school. Most recruited, some say to this day, the most heavily recruited player in the history of high school football. And he ends up going to Ohio State. His dad was his coach in high school, and his dad was this, just unbelievable dude. But he was just, balls to the wall 24/7. And that's what Chris was. And then he met his wife, and he goes and plays in the NFL for a long time. She gets cancer 3 different times. He has to quit. He was a great player, still the Lions' all-time leading tackler, and became a Christian. And he is just, his wife eventually died, and the breast cancer center at the James at Ohio State is named after her, Stephanie Spielman. And now he's the quasi president of the Detroit Lions. He left broadcasting to go do that with the Lions and hired Dan Campbell there and their general manager there and the whole 9 yards. But he's just an amazing guy. I communicate with him every day, every single day. And I just love the guy with all my heart.
Well, that's special. It's good to hear. I'm glad that he's been able to hopefully make some peace of his
and he's remarried and he's happy and his kids are all great, and the whole 9 yards. But it was just a tough, obviously, to say the least, it was a very tough time. And the way he was able to, it gave somebody who had not hit those bumps in the roads like I eventually did. You learned a lot from him on how to handle bumps in the road.
So did he help you then through, when you had your rough period a lot?
And Brian Billick was really good during that time too. And my partners with the Reds were phenomenal. Brantley and Chris Welsh. Chris Welsh has just been a great friend through all of this stuff. I talked to him. I just heard from him today. We had a common friend who passed away recently, and a guy who was like a second dad to me. The guy who was with me in Chicago that night after the game, him and his wife, Eddie Shepard, had recently passed away. And Chris took a picture that made him think of the guy and just wrote me a little while ago and sent me a text. And Chris he's been phenomenal. Just phenomenal. He's been a great friend. He's a good man.
That's awesome to hear. That's great. Yeah. And transition to more, I believe Arizona Diamondbacks were your only World Series covering team or championship covering team for the most part. Do you have any, we touched on it a little bit with Randy Johnson talk and Kurt Schilling talk and all that. Are there any other special stories out of that magical run in 2001?
Well, the most incredible part of it all was just that World Series, because in 2001, now when the World Series starts, it's roughly about a month and a half away from 9/11. And so, we all know what that was like. And so, when the World Series starts, it starts in Arizona, and the Diamondbacks win the first two games. And now we're going to Yankee Stadium. And they're still digging out the rubble from the World Trade Center every single day. And Rudy Giuliani, who's the mayor of New York at the time, now a month and a half has passed, and he is looking for anybody and everybody who has a name that could come down and give some kind of inspiration to those workers who were down there, 10, 12 hours a day and finding bodies and terrible things, right? And so he had asked if the Diamondbacks team could come down there on the off day between games 2 and 3. And so we did. And of course, all those guys knew who Johnson was, and Schilling and Luis Gonzalez and Matt Williams and Steve Finley and all these guys, Mark Grace. And it was an extremely moving time. And then when the game comes, President Bush walks out, and he throws the first pitch, just a pea right down the middle, and this bald eagles flying around a stadium, and the electricity at Yankee Stadium was just indescribable. And then they proceeded to win 3 straight games in their last at bat. It was the first time that had ever happened in the history of the World Series. They had walk-offs in all 3 games. And then the Diamondbacks come back home, they win the World Series. But it was those 3 days in New York which were just you were very privileged and lucky to be there because of what that World Series or anything meant to the people of that town after all that they had been through.
I say, was it tough to broadcast during that time at all?
No. I think you had to realize that, if there are people that are hurting and they're turning on to watch a ball game, they don't want to hear us talking about it and hear us hurting. So I was doing the game on radio in the World Series because Joe Buck was doing the TV. So I was doing the Diamondbacks radio at the time, and it was so much fun.
All right.
Yeah. You and I met through Chatterbox at the Reds event.
Yeah.
And Roger and I met through Chatterbox talking in the chat. And how was that experience? I just recently started doing a pregame show with them, and that's going great. And I want to know what that means to you, because that was really like your first break coming back. How was that? How was that?
Of all the people that have given me opportunities in my career, none of them have meant more to me than when Trace gave me a chance to come on board at Chatterbox to do high school football. And I did it with Tony Pike for 2 years. But I mean, I'm so indebted to him, because I couldn't even get a return phone call from anybody about anything. I mean, I was public enemy number one, at least as sports broadcasters go, and as a person in a lot of circles. And for Trace, he got a hold of me through Dr. Tim Kremchek. And when I met Trace, and he's like, "Hey, look," he says, "I know what happened, and if there's anything you got to say about it, I'd love to hear about it." And we talked for a couple hours and about everything. And he said, "Well, if you want to, if you're interested at all in college, high school football, I'd love to have you do it for our group." And it was phenomenal. I mean, I really mean it so much how grateful I am for Trace to just give me a chance to kind of, get back in the saddle a little bit. And then that led to Off the Bench, and that was so much fun when we decided to do that. I mean, that was such a great time. And so, look, I'm always going to be a part of the Chatterbox family. I mean, I don't care if tomorrow I got hired again by Fox or NBC or whoever it is to do anything. I am always going to find a way to be a part of the Chatterbox family because, they gave me a chance when no one else on the planet would.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Off the Bench, when that first started, that was so much fun with you and Casey and Paul, and they would do Shot Clock on Casey all the time, and the Hammond Eggers. Like, there's so many memories from that when that first started. It was really cool just seeing you guys, and you specifically, back. It was a lot. It was exciting.
That was a great time. I mean, it was just so. You're right. It was so much fun. Casey and Paul and going back and forth, and those guys coming up with the idea of let's teach Thom because I'm this old man and they're these young guys and all this terminology and this is drip and this, it was really, really fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Not only are yourself a legendary broadcaster, but you're a son of a legendary broadcaster, Reds Hall of Famer, Marty Brennaman. And also you have a budding broadcaster in the making with Luke in there. How has it been working with him with Dialed In on that project?
Well, it's been. I mean, you guys aren't dads, I don't think, right?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, you are. Okay, well then forgive me. Then you know what I'm talking about. I mean, when it's your kid, I mean, I can only imagine what it must have been like for my dad. And of course, when you're the kid, you never think about this, never. But now I think back what it must have been like for my dad when, the Cubs were on the superstation WGN and I'm doing the games and, he'd be able to watch them because the Reds would be playing at night and what must have been going through his mind about, if I screwed up or, whatever it might be. And that's the way I am with Luke. I mean, all these events that he does, he does a lot of this time of year, Indiana women's softball on the radio or men's baseball on the radio. And man, I just sit here in my house and I turn him on the computer and I'm texting him the whole game because that's what he wants me to do. I wouldn't do it if he didn't want me to do it. But there's no greater joy there's nothing greater in the world than your kids doing whatever it is that they like to do. It doesn't have to be something so public as a broadcaster. I mean, my daughter has had an incredible college career. She's getting ready to graduate, thank God, next month, and is trying to figure out where she's going to work. And you're just so proud of them. And I mean, I know there are a lot of people out there in this world that want to be parents that either haven't been able to be parents or, it just didn't happen for whatever reason. And there is nothing in the world like being a parent. I literally get down on my knees, I don't know how many times a day and just thank God that both of them are healthy and they're happy and they're doing well. And, all the rest of it is like, the cherry on top of the sundae. But I'm going to feel with him that if he wants help, I'll do anything in the world for him. And my dad was the same way. But my dad didn't beat me over the head about, you got to do this, you got to do that. If I wanted to come to him, he'd always be there and I could ask him about something for advice on it. And that's the way I try to be with Luke and our daughter on other things. But in this particular case, it's cool to watch him do it. And he loves doing it. And as long as he's having fun doing it, go get him.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And we've enjoyed watching both of you go back and forth on Dialed In from time to time. So
he's a good dude. He's a fun guy. He's fun to be around. He's smart. He thinks he knows everything. But at that age, he should feel like he knows everything. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Speaking more about your dad, he's getting a statue at Great American Ballpark. Do you plan on being there? And how exciting is that?
Oh, well, I mean, it's so incredibly exciting. I mean, what an honor. And I know he's so excited and he's already, he was over here he came over to watch some basketball Sunday and and he's like, it's by far the best thing that's ever happened to him professionally in his career, more than the Hall of Fame, more than anything. And he's just he can't believe it's going to happen. And I got to figure out what I'm going to do on that. They're giving him a statue, and it's the opening weekend of college football, and so I'm supposed to be working. So we got to figure that one out. But I'm really excited for him. I mean, he worked his tail off, man, for a long, long time. I mean, yeah, he made money, a lot of money, and he got a lot of notoriety, and he's in the Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, he sacrificed a lot. I mean, my folks split up when we were very young. We just moved to Cincinnati, and he's gone literally all the time, and so he sacrificed a lot to get to where he is, and now here he is in his 80s, and he's healthy and he's happy, thank God, and he's doing good. He's really enjoying retirement, and this will be a great day for him and a great day for our whole family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think Ricky and I are going to try to get down there in September and try to see him. I know he's also a favorite at Chairbox as well. I don't know if they'll ever pull him back out of retirement to get any more appearances.
Well, you guys, I got to get him to come on your show.
Oh, please. That'd be grateful.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. He'll do it. He loves doing it.
Does he? All right,
yeah, he loves doing this stuff.
Yeah. All right. And, I don't know how much you've caught of the 2025 season, but how are you feeling about the Redlegs?
It's kind of playing out the way I think everybody's kind of thought it would play out. I think that, their starting rotation has a chance to just be exceptional. I mean, not good, but like really good, like one of the best, if not the best in the league, I think. If guys can stay healthy. And that's been a big issue. We know about Lodolo and Green. Those guys never pitch full seasons. But Singer, I mean, he had a great, debut, and not every game's going to be like that. But this guy can pitch, Singer. I mean, I think he's going to have a really good year. And, we'll see how the number 5 slot plays out. But their front four, I mean, they got, Martinez. They've got guys that are capable of holding the opposition down to low-scoring games. And the question is, now the bullpen, we'll kind of see how that plays out, but I think they're going to be okay in the bullpen. They just got to settle down. And actually, if you take away opening day, the bullpen has pitched really good since then. I mean, they pitched great since then. And so, but the offense, I just don't feel like they did enough to address the needs of the offense in the offseason. And it even though it's only 6 games in, and I never was when I was a broadcaster, and I'm not now. I don't get all worked up about 6 games into a season and back-to-back 1-0 games and all that kind of thing. Big deal. You won't even remember it in a month from now. But them scoring is going to be a challenge. I think Encarnacion Strand will come back and have a really good year. McLean's going to be a really good player. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know there, but when you start going around the rest of the team, whether it's, how long is it going to take Stevenson to get back? How long is this thing going to bother Steer? Because he's clearly nowhere near 100%, and we'll see about the kid once he comes off the disabled list that they picked up in the offseason. But man, their offense, it leaves a lot to be desired. And so, I hope they can find a way to score more runs, because if they score some runs, they're going to win a pile of games. But I just don't know if they can score. And then I get very concerned about the end of the year, because, there's this unwritten sort of rule that Tom Verducci was a guy that came up with this idea, and I've worked with Tom dozens and dozens of games, and I love him. Great dude, smart guy, loves baseball. And, but he came up with this thing about you don't throw a guy more than 10 to 15% more than he did the year prior. And so I just get worried that once they get into August, September, if they're in a pennant race, how many times is Lodolo going to be able to go to the post? How many innings is Green going to go this year? Singer's already proven that he can pitch a full season and get you close to 200 innings. So he's not a problem. But Martinez was a reliever almost all of last year. Until the last month or whatever it was. And he was great, but he still was a reliever. I don't think he pitched 100 innings last year, did he? I would highly doubt it. Maybe he did. And so, he probably didn't go 125 this year. So, we'll see. But But they've got some exciting players. There's no doubt about it. I mean, De La Cruz he is some kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, like you've seen a lot of baseball. Does this group of guys remind you of anybody you've seen in the past? I mean,
they're not yet, just because they haven't proven it yet. You know, I mean, De La Cruz has still really only played one, maybe and a half full year. McLean missed a full year. He had a really good year his first year. But I mean, he knocked in 50 runs and he hit whatever it was, 290, and he had a really good year. But I mean, you got to do it for a while. And so I don't, that young group, the last group that was kind of like this that the Reds had was, I don't think it was Bruce and Votto in that group, because I think you have so many of them potentially that could be together. It reminds me a little bit more of the team in the late 80s, early 90s, where you had Larkin and Tracy Jones and Cal Daniels and Paul O'Neill and Eric Davis and Joe Oliver and all these different guys, but they really proved it over a number of years, consistently being really good players and healthy players. Davis got hurt a lot, but and unfortunately for Tracy Jones, because he would have been a hell of a player. People don't realize that. They know him as this funny guy that was on the radio now and all this stuff, but man, that guy could hit. And so he'd have been a great player. And of course, O'Neill ends up going to the Yankees. But yeah, I wouldn't say yet. They've got a lot of guys that still have a lot to prove. Steer has been consistent for a couple of years, Ellie for a year and a half. But after that, in my opinion, and really Stevenson's only had, his first year he came up, swung the bat well, had a couple of down years, was hurt. Last year came on strong. If he can get healthy, he looks like he's going to be a good player. Yeah,
I like that comp. I think Tracy Jones famously traded right before that 1990 World Series team win, unfortunately for him in his career. But I like that comp a lot for these experience. They're still young. A lot of these guys,
very young. Yeah,
hopefully they can grow into that type of team for sure. Yeah. Rick, you got anything else you got for Mr. Brennaman?
I kind of want to go back a little bit. We talked a lot about Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. Me and Roger had a conversation. I think was it before our live show on Sunday? It was.
It might have been recent, probably.
But why is Curt Schilling not in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, it's because people don't like his politics. I mean, it's pure and simple. I mean, because his numbers are sick.
Yeah,
and especially his postseason numbers are just off the charts. I mean, arguably the best postseason pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball. Now, there are some guys that, you could pull out of a hat and say, okay, well, wait a minute, they don't stack up with that guy and that guy. Okay, but you won't find 5 of them. He's one of the best of all time in the postseason. Ultimate gamer. I mean, game 1 of that 2001 World Series, he starts, he goes 8. He comes back game 5, goes 7, starts again, game 7, goes 7+. I mean, this guy, and he had thrown 300 innings already that season. It's all politics, and it's a joke. I mean, it really is a joke. Most of the people who are in the media are uber liberal people, including baseball sports writers, and I've known them my entire life. It's not to say every one of them are that. And Curt Schilling is a very far right-wing political thinker. And so he expresses his points of view, whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to be voting on him as a baseball player. And he is, without a doubt, a baseball Hall of Famer. No question about it.
You think he's got a chance, like if the Golden Era Committee, I don't know if he would even qualify for that yet, because I think he's run out of ballots, right?
Well, he asked to be taken off the ballot last year. So, I mean, because I think that it's got to be very disappointing for him. And you can say, well, he made his own bed. He's got to sleep in it. Well, I mean, look, everybody is allowed to have an opinion on something, everybody. And so, just because his opinion is not in the mainstream with the people who are voting and that they don't agree with him, should have nothing to do with them putting him in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Those numbers, I can't see those numbers. How does he stack? CC pitched a lot longer than him. Is that who that is?
Yeah. So Curt pitched in more games. It was only like 7 more games.
But you see, CC
started more.
Started over 14 more games than he did, right?
Yeah.
And so
I'll see if I can get it smaller.
So he starts 114 more games, and he only wins 25 more. He loses 15 more. Look at the ERA, 346, 374. Look at the strikeouts. Schilling in 114 fewer starts, right? And 300 and something fewer innings, strikes out more. Strikeout percentage, higher. Walks, not even close, far fewer. And, it's like, come on. And Sabathia is going in ahead of Schilling. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of things that seem not right. Not just trying to point out just Schilling's example, but others as well. Obviously.
Well, and David Concepcion for Reds fans. I mean, it's absolutely criminal. From a pitcher standpoint, Schilling would be the guy that I think has just gotten a raw deal. And from a position player standpoint, I think by far and away Concepcion's gotten the biggest raw deal. Guy's a 9-time All-Star, man. I mean, and multiple Gold Gloves and great offensive player, could steal bases, a lot of doubles, drove in some runs, hit some home runs. I mean, this guy was a great player. He just happened to be like the 5th or 6th best guy on his team.
Yeah. It's a shame because, and that's not a knock on CC Sabathia because he was a great
Not
pitcher.
at all. He was a gamer, tough guy, seemed like a good dude, battled his own demons and overcame them. I mean, he was a gamer. There's no doubt about it. And he had to pitch under the bright lights in New York. And that is a different world. Playing in New York is different than anywhere else by far. And if you can deliver there, like that old Frank Sinatra tune, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And he did.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, Rick, I'm out of questions, Tom. I've been so grateful. We were so grateful for your time. I know.
My pleasure, fellas. Thank you for having me. It's really been really enjoyed it. It's great seeing you guys. Besides just being a name on the chat.
Yeah. You can check out Tom. He's on X at Thom Brennamon TV, and also he's got that podcast with his son on the Believe Network called Dialed In. So check that out. Doing still great stuff, and really again thankful for all your time. And we'll be tuning into the CW to see you again broadcasting on football and basketball.
Well, hopefully we'll do the show again sometime soon. All right.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
All right, fellas. Thanks for having me. Be well. Thanks.
We appreciate it.
God bless.
Stay safe tonight.
All righty. You too.
Yes.
Thank you for watching the Red Hot Reds podcast, presented to you by Ohio Sports Talk.